Yodi, big Brody. Welcome back to the Beepball Blue Show with Neil Dog and Bam Bam. Although I should just say Yodi, big Brody, because that doesn't necessarily include all of our groups. So I guess I'll throw that one out after tonight.
Oh,
hello.
You're inclusive. Inclusive?
Well, I want to be inclusive, but that wasn't inclusive.
That's true.
What I was pointing out, I failed at inclusion on that.
I thought you were going to say Jordy. I was like, wow, man.
You know,
Jordy gets a shout out at the beginning of the show. That's pretty impressive, man.
You know, he'd probably like it too, because Jordy reached out to me, I don't even know, 2 years ago. Like, dude, what do I gotta do to get on the show? It's like, Jordy Stringer, we're doing a show about Beepball. Like, you know, it's bad enough that Seth and I aren't relevant. What? You haven't. You were a bench player 10 years ago. What we gotta have Jordy Stringer on the show
for? It's our top 10 bench players of all time. This guy can talk such a game, man. We would have to kind of come up with the you know, what's the best bench player? Somebody who could talk a lot of trash. Somebody you could always count on to be in the bar late at night.
Well, we're talking Beepball. That's starters and bench players. It's hard to separate when we're talking that.
It wasn't until that last World Series, man, when I was, you know, my playing time was sporadic, that I sat down to dinner. It's like, you know what? I'd have a couple beers.
A couple beers, French fries.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. I ain't got to worry about it.
The more have a jelly donut. You know what's sad, though? Like, again, for some of our starters, that's still the regular diet.
Yeah, right.
Not a lot of them. Maybe not the same number of them. But I believe it is the case with some.
Yeah, all right.
But hey, Set Dog.
Hey, Neil Dog.
The Beepball Blue Show has never had a hiatus like it just did. So, apologies to everyone for that. It certainly wasn't planned. Many of you already know, and for those that don't, my pop passed away back in April, and that had a lot to do with it. And just like literally the day that he passed away on a Friday, I had been staying at my brother's house because that's where my dad did his hospice care at, which was cool because it's that my brother bought the house my dad grew up in, and it's also the house my dad was born in. So he was born and passed away in the same house, 96 years apart. I was thinking about, you're a historian, and like I was pointing out to my family that I was like, man, I bet in the history of the world, there's not a large number of people who lived almost, he would have been 96 in July, who lived almost 96 years and died in the same house that they were born in. I realize, especially in older times, there are a lot of people that died in the house that they were born in, but not rarely. I bet it was 90 so many years later. Would you agree or disagree?
You know, I would probably, I mean, going way back in the day, people didn't usually live to 96. That's
where my key came in. My family jumped in right away when I was pointing that out. They're like, no, people did that all the time in the olden days. I was like, yeah, but they lived till they were like 45.
Yeah.
Not 95, you know?
Yes. So yes, I would agree with that statement that
it's just a small number. Consider the number of people that have lived in the world in houses.
Yeah, I mean, you think
which is huge, humongous.
Now, if you're talking about like houses, right? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's different. It's different. It's weird because you know, it wasn't until like in the United States, it wasn't until like the 1880s that most people ever, you know, went 30 miles, or the Civil War, I should say, that most people went 30 miles away from their house, you know, in their lifetime or whatever. But yes,
it's more the length of time that makes me feel that way.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, the people weren't. I mean, there were very few people going 96 years back in the day.
So
No.
for me, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously it wasn't
Was it
easy.
was it the same room? Or I
You
get
know, I brought that up. Um, it's the room like you know, my parents had me when they were like 40 and 41. So I came along a long time, you know, by the time I came, my grandfather had been gone for a long time. Um, like and my grandma only lived until I was about 11. But she slept in the room that he died in. I don't know if that was the room she had 4 kids. They were all born in that house.
right.
As far as I know, they're all born in that house. And so I don't know if that was my grandma and it's a 2-story house, so maybe way back then they stayed in a different room or
Right, right,
upstairs. I don't know. So, but I think the chances are good that the answer to that is yes.
right.
Again, because like the room he passed in is the room that was her bedroom when I, you know, when she was alive. So I don't know, but I did wonder that also. I don't know all the way around. Like obviously, when you know the tough time losing my father, but it was kind of cool, like the whole full circle, you know, thing or whatever.
Mike has just faded out.
What's that?
You faded out.
Can you still hear me now?
Now I can.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
now I can hear you.
I was finishing anyways, just saying it was for me. I just like the full circle part of it. I don't know, just kind of a cool little piece, like you know, to the
All right.
story, I guess. So, anyways, we'll do a little bit more on that towards the end of the show. I got a little bit of a tree because we talk about how many times on this show how much we love at least I talk a lot about the love for family connections in this sport, and I believe you've enjoyed it since your parents have gone to so many tournaments and your kids, you know, I mean, you played in a championship game with your son out there spotting in the game for you with the Heat. So you
Oh,
know,
you
I
know
mean,
that never happened. That
I
didn't
thought it did.
happen.
What, you didn't make it on the field?
No, no, and again, I've said this before. It's like it's one of my biggest like regrets or the
Was that your last year that you
no,
played?
no, Trajan didn't go to the one year that Trajan didn't go to the World Series, that I went to the World Series, the Heat went to the championship.
Oh, I did not remember that. Yeah, it
The
got tougher
one
once you got
year.
into high school football to miss like
Yeah,
training camps. Yeah.
yeah, so we missed that. And I
Yeah.
and I always felt bad, especially when we went to the championship game. I felt bad because Trajan had always, as a little kid, wanted to go to championship games. And I would always say, no, we can't go to the championship game until we're playing in a championship game. And so the one time that we actually made the championship game,
He
he
wasn't
wasn't
there.
there. So that was
I've
kind of
forgotten all that.
a bummer for me. But and that led to the next year when he did come, that we partied and got eliminated on our Friday, and we got eliminated Friday night. And I knew it was my last World Series. So Neil Dog, I had a good party Friday night, man.
Good goodbye.
All right, man. And Trader was hanging out with us that night, man. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was still partying. And Trader's like, man, I'm about to go to sleep. And I was like, all right, okay. And I took him up to the room to let him in. And he's like, man, I was like, man, I'm about to go back down. He's like, remember though, we're going to the championship game tomorrow. I was like, all right. I'm like, no doubt, man. So 8 o'clock in the morning, I was up, man. But I'm sorry, I have segued into that. That was funny, man. That was funny. That
No,
night, that was
it's all good. I was just pointing out, you know, that we love the family connection, and even though my dad didn't have a lot to do with the world, he had hardly anything to do with the World Series. He was a part of Beepball here locally years ago, so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Something that I thought was important to say, kind of out of the gates, and let me check, at least like 10 minutes in. uh, Even though this is episode, like, I'm not even positive, like 117 or 118 of the Beepball Blues show overall, This is episode number 1 of the Beepball Blues Show podcast. Even though I know I've talked to you, Set Dog, for like 2 years about turning it into a podcast. I just haven't. I've always wanted to do. This is kind of funny, actually. I've always. I've had the editing software, Goldwave, to do it for a couple years, and so I've wanted to learn how to use it and start putting it out as a podcast, just so we hit all avenues we could possibly hit with the show, and get like 120 listeners to like 100. But I just never got around to it. So today, as we decided to go and finally get back on track, I reached out to Frank, told him what we were planning, and I told him I wanted him to know ahead of time that we were going to be making it a podcast also, and he thought that we'd just be doing like the same copy that he puts together for the YouTube page. He's like, I already have it, I already make like an audio file of it when I make it, so I could just send you the audio file. It's like, God, if we had this conversation like 2 years ago, we could have been doing the podcast all this time. So I didn't even know that it was possible. I've been saving the audio files because when I record on Zoom, I get an audio file and a Zoom file. So I've saved all the audio files because I'd planned to do this so long ago. So whenever we miss a week or something, in a couple of weeks, I could pull up some of the old stuff and put it out still. But we could have already been doing it, which I had no idea. But I want to. I mean, from all the years of knowing me, I used to play around with tape recorders, editing stuff or whatever.
So did you figure out how to edit it, or is Frank?
No, he'll still do the YouTube part, and I'm going to do the audio part. I've got it mostly figured out. So I'll it'll be up this week or whatever. So I've got it mostly figured out. It's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that. So like the pattern of the show now. So what we've been doing is, we get on Facebook now, record it live, and then we have the YouTube stuff up. Usually, our usual day for the show is Sunday, but we're recording on Monday. I'm not waiting till Sunday, so we'll have the YouTube up this week on Tuesday, and then I'll come along a few days later and put the podcast stuff out. So it just be a little addition to what we've been doing all this time, and whatever, kind of spread it out a little bit.
Oh, spread the love, Neil Dog. I like to spread the love, man.
I started to say this earlier, but just whatever. If I sound a little congested, I keep coughing on people. That was part of the reason why the long delay. Also, I was saying, so my dad passed on Friday. I'd been staying up at my brother's house while he was doing the hospice there, and so I stayed there Friday night. Came home Saturday, and I woke up Sunday with a cold. And I really there's only like 2 days when it was really bad. I really didn't feel good, but the congestion stayed with me like for weeks, man. Like even now, I have felt fine for weeks. I'm exercising, walking, whatever. But man, I've still just got some congestion. I finally
you got that long COVID, Neil Dog. You got that long COVID.
Because it never like really felt real bad. I wasn't around anybody once I came home for a few weeks. So I guess it didn't matter, but I never even thought about testing because it just felt like kind of a normal cold. Like when I think I had COVID, I couldn't test myself back a few years ago when I think I had COVID. You know what I mean? I didn't even have a test at the house at the time. Sure. So I never got tested, but that was a different thing. Like, you know what I mean? I lost my sense of smell. And it was a cold like no other cold I ever had. It lasted for 2 weeks. So whether I tested or not, I feel very confident that I had COVID at that time. But this was nothing like that. This was just a general, cold or whatever. But finally started.
When I had COVID, I never had a symptom. What do you even know unless other people got it? So.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying I didn't have it this time,
Right,
but none of the people, I was around a lot of people. Nobody else got COVID or whatever.
right, right,
And my
right,
dad's whole thing started like he had a cold that turned into pneumonia.
right,
And you know, he's 95. He fell 6 months ago and hasn't been real active since then. It wasn't able to be because of the fall. And, you know, once he got pneumonia at that age, it just took
right.
him down. So I was around, you know, I was in
Yeah,
his
yeah.
room with him a lot for a couple of weeks or whatever. Who knows? I could have picked it up, going in and out of hospital, hospice, whatever, everything. So,
Sure, yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah,
So,
cough it up,
yeah,
get it
right. Get
all
it
out
out. That's funny.
there.
Every time I'm doing that, it reminds me because you know he was in the hospital for like 10 days before going into hospice or whatever, and whenever you know he had all that deep congestion, and whenever he'd start coughing out, the nurses like cough it up, cough, you know, he can't hear anything anyways. They're like yelling, screaming in his face, cough it up. So every time I'm like, it's funny that you blurted that out because that's what I'm thinking every time that I'm like feel real congested. It's like cough it up, cough it up.
Get it out, man. Get it out, Neil Dog. Talk it up,
So,
man.
anyways, for anybody hopefully joining us that's new on the
Mhm.
podcast side of things, might not have heard the show before. This is a show that's been going now for 3 years. We feature the sport baseball for the blind. We bring on the players, the teams, the people involved off the field. I don't know, whatever we feel like doing
Oh,
in the end,
we only bring in the best of the best. Just the best of the best. Just Joe.
or the people
Bring
I
it.
have contact with.
Yeah, right. Or at least the people who will
Good
come
or
on
bad,
every.
if I got their contact and we don't have anything lined
Hey,
up.
hey, hey, Neil Dog. You know what they say the best ability is, right?
What?
Availability.
Availability, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, I said what, knowing the answer. No, the first coach I ever heard say that is John Gruden when he was coaching the Raiders, and he was saying it in a post game press conference when he just sounded irritated at all the unavailable players. He's like, "Well, you know, I always say the best ability is availability," and he just sounded angry when he said it. So the show, something you could count on, despite like our last 5 6 weeks not being available. You could count on at least 2 shows a month. But as the season gets going, which is now, we'll be doing shows a lot more often. I was in touch with Demo earlier because we got tournaments that are going to be coming up soon. So he'll be coming on doing recaps. We'll be featuring players and whatever, everything going on. So we'll have a lot of action going on this
Beepball
summer.
Jeopardy at some point this show.
Not during the season. There's too much
Oh
going.
man, come
There's too much
on, man.
going on. I mean, that's a
Beepball
good
Jeopardy
off season.
is an on season thing. It's competition, man. It's like a regional tournament, Neil Dog. It's like a regional tournament. Just
Not the
on
way I do it. It's a regional nightmare. But I've always felt like that's kind of better during the off season because it's harder for us to find content during the off season. It's between now and the World Series, it's going to be easy to find content
But are
overall.
we supposed to get a third champion so then we can have a tournament of champions, or do we already have a tournament of champions lined up?
Well, not I mean, well, we got Demo and Axel, not Demo. We got Booker and Axel Cox.
Yeah, so
So we
we
would
need
need a third one, but
we
that's
need a third.
already the start of a bad field, right?
No, like I said, I'll take the Alex Trebek seat.
Literally, like the day we had the last version of it, and Demo lost to Booker. Like hours later, he's like, "Man, you got to give me one more shot." He's already lobbying to get back on to another one. So
Sorry,
who
nobody.
knows? Who knows?
All right,
Who knows?
all right.
But
I
we
just
do
don't
try
know.
to have fun with it. So we'll figure something out. We do have games coming up. Unfortunately, the Hitters and Heroes tournament had to be canceled. So we won't have that to cover this time around. But this coming weekend, and I want to do another show. Well, I meant to talk to you before we started recording on when you thought your best availability is, but I would like to do another show in the next week and we'll get a guest on and start getting going on that stuff again. But also, the Atlanta Chaos and the Braille Bandits are playing a makeup game. They were supposed to play the weekend that Fort Lauderdale got like 800 billion gallons of water in a 24-hour period. Do you remember? Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
They got 2 feet of water in a 24-hour period. And I read on Twitter or something that's like, or no, I might have got a notification, I think, from the Weather Channel that was like 800 billion gallons of water. Something crazy like that.
That's crazy.
So they're playing their makeup game, but also something that's cool because I don't think it's ever been done before. The New Jersey Titans and the Long Island Bombers are playing a game at Central Park in New York. I don't believe a beat baseball game's ever been played at Central Park before. So it'd probably be better.
This weekend?
Yeah, like Saturday. I think both are on Saturday. So might be better. And since we're already late, kind of behind our normal schedule, might be, it's already Monday and the YouTube stuff won't be up till Tuesday and the podcast later in the week. So might be better to wait and record like Sunday or Monday when we have some results from those games, because we'll probably end up doing that a lot while the tournaments are going on in the following weeks anyway. So.
Oh, yeah. Sunday be tough. We got the Dante Palmer Tournament of Champions flag football tournament.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying, like, I just between like getting information about tournaments and games and you and your 18,000 kid commitments.
18,000 kids, like I was shot.
Your 3 kids seem to produce about 18,000 commitments, so that's why I say we should have talked about availability. But I would like to get a show in the next week, and then we could take the following week off if we want, because it'll be Memorial Weekend. Do you have anything to add on, like to the like the podcast group or anything that we've thrown out so far?
Oh, it's funny because we've talked about it for so long. I've actually I just thought it never really actually was going to happen. So, but as as you guys see, I'm here. If we're introducing ourselves, I'm here for comic relief or whatever. Keep Neil off the serious path. Try to distract Neil. So,
I had my mic muted because I had to cough up more phlegm. What were you saying that you didn't think would happen, or
never happened? The podcast. I mean, we've been talking. I mean, you and I have been talking about this for a long time or whatever. And it's funny that me. There were other things that I would always like bail out on the podcast, things of doing my dissertation or whatever. And it's funny that it finally like started up or whatever, or a version of it.
See, I don't even agree that it has. I mean, I know you're right. Like I've been talking about wanting to make this show like a podcast,
right.
Which all we're doing is taking the same thing that's on Facebook or YouTube and just, I'll put some music on the beginning and on the end, just like Frank does for the YouTube thing, and it'll go up as a podcast. But what we've been talking about for a long time, it literally since like 2006 or 4, or since before podcasts were podcasts, it's doing like a more mainstream podcast.
Yeah, no,
which we still aren't doing. So like we still haven't reached that point.
No, and that's why I said in some way, shape, or form. Again, it's been something we've talked about for a long time and never pulled it to court. And again, that's what I'm saying. It's on me or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But on the like the mainstream side of it, but that it's finally been pulled together in some way, shape, or form is after all these years. It's quite the monumental achievement, man.
Yeah. but right along on our schedule in life.
Exactly, like everything else.
20 years later.
Yeah, exactly, man. We're the youngest children, man. What can we say?
I'm going to be curious to see like the reception of the podcast as far as like the downloads compared to
Right.
the views on Facebook or the views on YouTube, because I think podcasts are more user friendly, like easier to like one thing I know, Eric Masriegos, the greatest player in the history of our game, arguably. um
Arguably, God.
like I know
Bite
he's
your tongue. Spite your tongue. I know. Go ahead.
I mean, I know you and I believe that, but
You know, and I hate to bring up other things from other places, but there's a guy on a system that you and I
right,
listen to on the sports in the sports room or whatever. He has a sports room. You appreciate his commentary.
right.
And perhaps he stole this from somebody. He says, there is no such thing as a goat. He's like, but there are goat herds, right? And so, Eric is part of the goat herd, right?
I mean, you talked about the Jeopardy. When I go through the All-Star stuff, I had to go back to the 90s for one of our categories.
Right.
When you see, like people see what Eric Rodriguez is doing now, and it is mind-boggling. And when you think about what he could do for the next 15 years,
right.
Yes, he easily could go down as the best of all time. But for right now, today, if you go back, starting in 1992, from that point forward, Eric Masriegos is either on the offensive or the defensive team every year until like 2016, 2019. And there's some years he's on both, and there's multiple MVPs. So once I go through that, it's like, man, I love Eric Rodriguez. That's my dude. But Eric Masriego still got to get the nod. But where that all was going is like he's complained that, like he likes our show, but when he can't check out the whole show at one point on the YouTube channel or whatever, like getting back to where he left off is a pain in the backside. So he doesn't do it a lot. And I'm sure that's the case with a lot of people. But with a podcast, when you pause it, stop it, you go back, it fires up right where you stopped it or whatever. So plus people like who drive or whatever could listen in the car. You could listen on a bus, whatever, you know what I mean? It's more user friendly. So I'll be interested to see, compared to what we've been doing the last 3 years or whatever, what the reception's like. So let's get out of here. I told you I got something I got to jump into. I did want to just do a little, talk about my dad a little bit, since he did get involved with Beepball with us a little bit. So I found Beep Baseball in 1986 and got part of became part of a group here in Sacramento that started building a team. And even though we only made it to the World Series once in 1993, that really was more the beginning of the Dogs than the end of the Sacramento Thrashers, I would say. But when I started in the 80s, and when you started in the 80s and 88, like there was a league here in California. We had enough teams just in the Northern California area between Sacramento and San Francisco, which most of it was in the Bay Area. Really, just for a long time, it's just my team here in Sacramento. But we had a league, and had a season and playoffs and all that stuff. And my dad umped a lot of the games here in Sacramento, which I know for my opponents, which you and I were opponents at the time. Not everybody's a fan of us umpiring.
Hey, as a father now, I can understand, calling a little something for your son. It's all good, Neil Dog. It's all good. I understand the man.
As much like hassling like you and Eric and Don gave me over the years or whatever. Like I feel very like I'm not saying you guys whatever would like all his calls, not like all his calls. But I know one thing for damn sure, he never made one call for me. Like my dad might not like. I don't even know how to put it. He wouldn't cheat for his kids. Like he's not that dad. You know what I mean? He like he just didn't live that way. He's old school. I mean, dude, my dad. I mean, he was born in 1927, so he graduated high school in 1945. He never even went to his graduation because he was drafted into World War II. Fortunately, the war was over, 6 months later or whatever, but he still served, 4 years in the Navy. But literally as a 17-year-old, think about how you felt like with your, Trajan going up to college, because he was still 17 when he started his freshman year, and just realizing how young, he is to be taking on that responsibility. Man, my dad got, not by choice, he got sent to boot camp at 17 years old, man. And I just can't imagine, you know what I mean? But he's old school, man. He in a lot of ways, you and Eric used to joke, for people that remember the TV show Happy Days, Ralph Mouth and his dad. I don't even remember what his dad's name, Ralph Mouth's dad. But, the funny thing on Happy Days was, on the rare occasion Ralph Mouth's dad would come on the show, like they were father and son, you know what I mean? They're two clowns that came from the same planet. And that's me and my dad. Even though I'm the youngest of 5 kids and the youngest of 4 boys, I feel like, sense of humor wise, my dad and I was more like him than anybody else.
I totally forgot about that. That's funny as you started to tell us. I remember calling you guys that.
Yeah, you and Eric both, man. You guys would go on and on. I remember because Greg Parra, who pitched for the Dogs and spotted for the Dogs, and has been in North Carolina since 1990. He was the pitcher here. He lived in Sacramento when we started the Thrashers and was our pitcher. And so my dad knew him really well. But then he moved to North Carolina in 1990, and my dad saw him very little after that. But in 1997, when we needed a pitcher, and I called Greg at the last minute, and he came, and he came out and practiced with us 2 weeks before the World Series. And my dad came over, and Greg's sitting in here. My dad just walks in. He said, "Hey, strikeout!" Just no hesitation, man. All excited. Didn't even feel bad. Just "Hey, strikeout!" So that was funny. It's something else I wanted to share. That always stands out to me about his sense of humor, just because he had a very quick wit. And this was late 90s, so he was 72, 73, somewhere in there, early 70s. And it was the night before Father's Day. I'm talking to him on the phone, and we were having a family thing over at my parents' house the next day. And he's like, "So I assume when we were getting off the phone, he's like, "So I assume I'm going to see you tomorrow?" It's I'm not sure. I was like, "Really? Father's Day is not a holiday I put a lot of thought into." And he's like, "I probably wouldn't either if I didn't know who my father was." And it was instant, man. He'd been waiting for me to give him the opportunity. It's just man, I was okay, you win. I thought I was slapping you around, but you got me. My mouth was open. You got me.
That's obviously that's why we called you guys. Well, it's funny now thinking back on that, because that's exactly Ralph Mouth and his that was a perfect one or whatever. And of course, your father nicknamed me Dion for.
Yeah, he always called you Dion.
For Deion Sanders, even though I hated Deion Sanders, but I don't know why he called me Dion, man.
I do. Something he did he was, like I said, he had me when he was 41 when I was born, or turned 41 just a few weeks later. So he was retired by the time I was getting out of high school, So when I've been living in this house now for almost 33 years. And, 30 years ago, I had 2 dogs, it's I had a girlfriend and a roommate. and everybody was going to help me with the big dogs I had, and eventually the girlfriend wasn't around, and the roommate wasn't as helpful as he said he would be. And my dad started coming out once a week and helped me get my yards cleaned up. Help me get clean up after the dogs and cut the grass and all that stuff. And that's really when my relationship with him started. Like we weren't really that close when I was growing up, but we got really close then because he'd bring donuts and muffins and which because you were here sometimes. We'd sit around drinking coffee, eating and talking, and that's when my dad and I got really to know each other, got really close. But you and I also, that's when we started developing our friendship. And sometimes you come stay out here for days or whatever. And so my dad would come through, and you were a Cowboys fan, and he's a 49ers fan. And in the early 90s, it was the Cowboys or the 49ers in the World Series, in the Super Bowl every year. And Deion Sanders played a few of those seasons with the Cowboys and played some with the Niners. So, he was a big character at the time, and he just started calling you Dion or whatever. He's how I'm terrible with remembering names? That's who I get it from. Like, he doesn't remember names, but he remembers nicknames he makes up for people. Two like last things for me. Like one, speaking of you or whatever, because his memory started to get a little sketchy in the last couple years. But down the stretch, like in the last 6 months, like people, like he had forgotten, a lot of people in his past or whatever, like that. Actually, more people like in the more recent past. Like he could remember people from his childhood really clear, but the last like 30 years got a little more sketchy for him as he got closer to the end. But Beepball wise, like just my friends wise, like he remembered. He would ask me about you and Trajan. He would ask about Eric and Don, even though he remembers like it didn't end well with Don. Like he would still ask if I've talked to him. And Tim Hibner, he never remember. You call him Whiskers, I think. but Tim and Batman, Mark Masterson, are a long time Hall of Fame spotter from the Dogs. And that Mark would take me to see him and stuff sometimes. So, he knew Batman better, but he always remembered him being called Batman. He didn't remember his name's Mark, but he'd always remember Batman and Dion, Whiskers. Why he remembers Tim so well is because, like, when he pitched for, since the tournament was here in California in 2009, the last year I played, my parents were at all of our games, and Tim was our pitcher, and he just remembers Tim just getting the crap beaten out. And also go back to the 99 tournament when Tim was pitching for Oklahoma. He just remembers Tim just taking ball after ball and getting up and pitching again. When he was in, before he moved into the rest home at the end, he was in like a rehab facility because he had fallen in. Like he had two roommates, and like he would tell them about me playing beat baseball, and he did go right into Tim. This pitcher, man, that ball would hit him right in the head. He'd get right back up. Oh, yeah, I wanted to share too, because I mentioned like not everybody in the league liked him as an umpire necessarily, but really that in my mind came from one main thing, and that was there was a game between my Thrashers team and the East Bay Blaze. Even though I played with the Blaze at the World Series, we were on separate teams in the league. And there's a game here in Sacramento. Don Robinson's pitching for the Blaze. And this is back when we still had two balls and 5 strikes. And sometimes you might remember people would let 2 balls go by before they'd even swing at the ball. Start with a 2-0 count. And Kimmy Watts, someone who probably I think should be in the Hall of Fame. Like I think you and Kimmy both should be in the Hall of Fame, simply based on the fact you each hit the first home run. Like you hit the first ever home run in beat baseball in 1990. He was the first left-hander to ever do it in 1993. But Kimmy was a monster left-handed bat. Made the all-tournament team, I know, in '86 when they finished second, but I'm sure he did it more times after that. In '86, he had the best batting average in the entire MBBA. But so Kimmy's up at bat, and something Kimmy would do when he would take those two balls is do like a check swing. And my dad, being old school, pointed out to him in the first at bat, when you do that, you're crossing the corner of the plate. He's like, and once you cross the corner of the plate, I'm gonna call it a strike. In the very next at bat, he did it again, and my dad says strike. And Kimmy ended up striking out because Don got so mad, man. Don Robinson, nobody's got a temper like Don Robinson. For people who don't know that, Don Robinson was DB before DB, maybe. I don't know that the MBBA would know that. But as far as like just getting mad and blowing up, but I mean, Don had a shorter fuse than me, and he could go crazy once he lost.
It's funny just when you think that we also had Jack Wilson on the team, who was Justin.
Very short temper also.
You can see why the Blaze fell apart so much.
There was a game between the East Bay Blaze and the North Bay Nemesis, and I think it's before you and I. It wasn't at the World Series, so it was before you joined the Blaze. Like during the regular season, and the call went against the Blaze, and whoever the umpire was, it was somebody that that the North Bay Nemesis has set up, and the call went against the Blaze. And Jack, I've heard stories from multiple players about Jack just out in the field yelling at him. He got thrown off the field because he just kept yelling at him. You suck, North Bay butt. You suck, North Bay butt. I'm not cleaning it up. That's exactly the way he kept saying it. he lost it.
Hey, Mary won't let him cuss now.
Yeah, Mary Wilson. Then on the other side of the coin, a reborn Christian that could have been a nicer person. But anyways,
so back to
so my dad called that a strike, and that like the Blaze hated my dad after that. Don wasn't. It's funny that Don and I became teammates later because Don obviously didn't like him from that. I remember after because they argued the call, and my dad's like, hey, look, I told you in the last at bat, if he crosses the plate, I'm going to call it a strike. He did it again. I called it a strike. What do you want me to do? I told you it was coming. If Don turns around, we're out on defense. I'm out on defense with the Thrashers. He turns around, turns his back to the plate, just yells at all of us. He's like, I think that's a shitty call. Like, yeah, you do, but it went for us. Night. We still lost the game. I don't think the Thrashers ever beat the Blaze, we still lost the game. They didn't have any reason to worry. But honestly, like everybody had fun with my dad because he's always being a clown out there. So,
wasn't he at the plate when you and I were when we first battled?
I don't think so.
I think he was.
You might be right, though.
I think we were in Sacramento, and he was at.
We were in Sacramento.
And that's why I think you got so offended. Because I started.
No, it's not. I know that.
Okay, cool.
Right, cool. John Shingari was a player on our team, and I grew up with John. Like, he's the first blind friend I ever got. I met him about a year after I went blind, and we were like best friends, like through high school and stuff. And he played the first few years that I played. And you yelled something at him on the sideline. Like he was up at bat right before he batted sixth. I batted first. And so he had just struck out right before I came up to the plate, and you were yelling stuff at him. You were just talking hella trash to the whole team. I mean, both of our teams were fired up by that point.
It was back in the good old days where,
But like before that, earlier in the game, like our two teams, I don't remember what happened, but we had something going on that day, and we're both yelling at each other. And you yelled something at him, and I was like, oh, that's it. And I just walking out there like I was going to do something. It's funny for the rest of the story. Your dad kept running. Your dad, because at the time you were like 16 and I was like 21 or whatever. We were both young, but you were a teenager, even though you're bigger than me.
Yeah,
You probably would have whooped my ass. But your dad comes running out behind me and grabs me from behind. It's like, don't you go after my son. And we've talked about that. I remember you and I were talking about it one night, and I was like, man, obviously your dad knew what was up because he stopped me from going out there. He's like, that's why he likes you so much. He feels like he saved your life. Anyways, man.
All right.
That's all I got, man. So, man, rest in peace to my pops.
Yes,
he gave me a lot
sir.
of years. He was a great dad to me. And, I appreciate him. I'm in a good place with it because, man, his body was pretty worn out. I think he's at peace. I feel like he's at peace. So.
You can't complain about 95 years, man. Shit.
Almost 96, man. He was real close to 96.
All right.
So, now rest in peace.
Most of those times he was still up there moving, right? I mean, that's 70, 80 out there in that heat doing that yard, man.
You and I in the house. Cool. Wonder when it'll be done. Yeah. See if he'll take us up to Jasper's, get some burgers.
You done yet, Pops? You want some water? It's hot out there, Pops. Come on in.
You know, that's another thing since I threw it out there. I'll throw in there since it's funny. There's a burger place near my house called Jasper's, a locally owned place, and they had what they called the double giant bacon burger, and that was the West Coast dog special, man. We after so many of our practices would go up, and there'd be 8, 10, 12 of us. We'd all get the double bacon giant with fries and a lot of times a milkshake. They make great milkshakes. And, man, these double giants weighed about 2 pounds apiece. So when you got 10, 12 of them. And so there was a time or two when my dad made that run for us, you know, like only 1 or 2. We'd always go pick it up and come and I'll eat it here at my house. And my dad would tell people stories like, man, you should see their team eat after those practices. That bag weighed about 80 pounds. Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. Thanks for the ride, Pop. We appreciate it. Before Uber. There were no Uber Eats. DoorDash. We needed a ride. Christina didn't even drive at first.
Back in the olden days.
Yeah.
Olden days.
All right, it's funny, man. We were talking earlier. It's like, yeah, man, we both got a lot going on. We can knock this out in 30 minutes. Yeah, well, we like to talk.
Yeah, no, I laughed when you were commenting on something you wanted to bring up out the gate, and then you're like, yeah, but look, we're 10 minutes in. Yeah, I was like, man,
we're in trouble.
But you know, in the end, we might go for like 2 hours, man, and that 10 minutes would be right out the gate.
Those that are checking out on the podcast, see, they could take 2 or 3 attempts at getting through this.
Yeah.
Or at least one before they say, that's enough. Whatever works. Just download it for us. Subscribe, download, give us a little descriptive if you want. You know, hit a thumbs up. Help us out if you don't mind. But thank you for letting me indulge a little bit. This kind of feel like this is a little bit of a self-indulgent thing. Talk about my dad so much, but I appreciate you sitting in, and appreciate anybody that checked it out very much. Thank you to everybody that reached out. Got a lot of love from my Beepball people. My boy D-Fop called. Man, I heard from D-Fop the other day. A lot of people reached out with nice messages. Tyler Rodriguez and Cam reached out, giving me some love. I appreciate all the love everybody gave me. Sorry, I'm not mentioning everybody, but man, I appreciate it. I guess I bring up Tyler because, man, he's like, man, we're a Beepball family. I was like, dude hasn't even met me. Man, but he still includes me in that Beepball family. So I love everybody. Appreciate it very much. And we'll get things back on track, and we'll get Beepball going next week. So thank you very much. Thank you, Seth Dog. Good to see you.
Yes.
Good to see you. It's been a while. It's the only time we ever really talk is when we're doing a show.
All right.
People probably think we're in contact all the time, and there's no reason why we can't put together things together. But man, we don't talk until we get on Zoom.
Yeah, I was like, hey, man. It's like since both of us are retired, right? It's like our extended World Series. We always would talk during the World Series more than any. I would call him or he'd call me.
Oh, yeah.
We don't talk at all. through the month leading
Same
up.
with Greg Parr. Like Greg Parr and I hardly ever talked, but man, when he was going to the World Series, like 3 calls a day.
Yeah, right.
Nobody gave me better updates than Greg, man. Anyway.
All right, we're good.
All right. So thank you, Seth Dog. Thank you, Frank Porter, for staying with us and doing everything you do. Thank you, Mr. Chris Jackson, for helping get this video shared in the nation. And we will catch everybody next week. Be well until then.